Welcome to Keep On Pushing TV. I am your host, Devon Harris, and as always, we share ideas and insights that are going to challenge and inspire you to keep on pushing and in the process, live your best life. Because that's what we want for you and of you and from you. And if you want the same thing, guess what? You're in the right place. So, hey, welcome to Keep On Pushing TV. Our guest today is the owner and founder of Endless Voice Productions, a company which delivers innovative and creative playwrights as well as inspiring events. The debut of her 2017 off-Broadway play, The Wounded Soul, was the impetus which propelled her to create the annual A Woman's Worth Awards and Women in Business events. She's a soon-to-be author. This month, October, she will release her first book, The Restored Soul. She is also the recipient of the 2019 Women Empowerment Institution Trailblazer Award as an accomplished leader in the community and received a proclamation from the Westchester County Governor for the exceptional example she has made with her unique personal achievements. A truly dynamic and incredible individual, my friend. I'm so excited to welcome Sheryl Hatwood to the show. Sheryl, welcome to Keep On Pushing.
Thank you, Devon, for having me. I'm excited to have our conversation.
Yes, I think we're gonna have some fun. I'm not even sure where to start because you've had such an amazing journey. Tell you what, let's go home. Can we? Shall we?
We can start from the beginning.
Back to Jamaica, girl. Your early days.
Take you back.
So tell me about your early days in Jamaica, because I know you eventually migrated.
Yes. So, well, people like was a spring chicken. So I left Jamaica. I was born in St. Andrew, Duane Park, and I left when I was 3. So my roots is not as grounded in Jamaica as it should be, I should say, but we went back every year because my parents thought it was very important for us to stay connected to our culture. At 3, I moved to a small town in Canada, Godrich, population 7,000 people. We were the only Black family there, and my sister was put in the newspaper as the first Black baby born in that town. So she's a historical site. Yes. And we stayed there for at least, I think, 8 years. And then we moved to London, Ontario, because my dad thought it was important for us to be around more of our culture, stay connected. And London was more metropolitan and it was closer to Toronto, Ontario. So that's my upbringing really started in Canada with some really still strong Jamaican roots, because you can never uproot that.
No, absolutely, absolutely. How old were you when you moved to London, Ontario?
I was 13.
So what was the experience like in that small town that you grew up in?
Well, I didn't know I was different until people told me I was different.
Right.
And I grew up in an age where Roots was on. Roots was just debuting on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard some
the theories about Kinta Kunte and so
yes.
on. Right.
So I heard some names I've never heard before or was exposed to. So that is when I realized that we were really different. And my dad armed us with the truth. He never really sugarcoated anything, but he always made us stand strong, never to be ashamed of who we were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we moved to London, I was 13, and it was difficult because I left a lot of experiences behind, and I was still trying to work through who I was. And I came to London, and I don't think I understood at that time where I fit in, because I was still trying to. I wasn't Black enough for the Black kids, because they thought I spoke too perfect, and I wasn't white enough for the white kids. So I was always trying to find my way in between. And that really created some problems in life for me.
It's kind of interesting. You're not the only person you know, to have that experience where because you speak proper English, let's say, you're not quote unquote black enough. And
Right.
obviously, because you speak too white, and obviously your skin isn't light enough for you to pass as white. So you're kind of hanging out there in no man's land, as it were. Um, but you grew up, you know, to become this incredible, accomplished business person, entrepreneur, and playwright and musician and all that stuff. What interests did you have when you were growing up?
I was always arts. I was always creative. I was always in the creative world. I gravitated to the piano, and I was the only one that didn't have to be forced to play it. I love to draw. I love to sing. I love to dance. But like so many Caribbean parents, they want you to go and be a teacher, a lawyer. You know, those be educated in those professions that they think will give you the best. Because I did get a scholarship for a school in the States to draw, and my dad said you can't make a living drawing pictures for people.
Yeah.
That's exactly how he put it. And
Well,
so I went.
wrong, but you know.
No, well, it's the arts are the arts is underplayed, and there's a huge benefit to being in the arts. But I was put in nursing school. I was supposed to be a nurse because my mother thought that she was a nurse, that I should be a nurse. It's not for me. So I pretended to go to school for about, I don't know, 2 months. And then my dad said, how's school going? And I told him it was good. I did this and this and this. He's like, that's funny. They called and said you haven't been there in 3 weeks. So,
I was going to say in Jamaica, you're a skull in school, huh?
so it's like, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be a nurse. He's like, what do you want to be? I said, a mechanic. So I apprenticed with him.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I apprenticed with him, and I have my Class C mechanic license, and I went that route. But then I knew that I wanted to, working with my father, I wasn't disciplined enough to realize what I needed to do to survive. And I went out on my own and took a job with the airlines to get out of my area. And I went to Toronto, and from Toronto, I pursued my law clerk, and I worked in legal, and then it just transformed from there. But my business sense came from working with my dad. Education just helped it, but the experiences came from my dad.
So your dad was a mechanic and owned his own shop?
Yes. Yeah. He did for 37 years. He just retired.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. So your mom wanted to be a nurse. You end up working with your dad as a mechanic. How did your mom feel about that?
Well, you know, my dad was the boss, so whatever was the final word was the final word. She didn't like it because she just thought I was a lost soul, and you know, and there's a story behind that. But my dad, they were just ready to put me anywhere that I could be grounded and learn something. And I really love working with cars. I love working with my hands, and I wish I could still work on cars today, but they make them so complex that you have to take them back to the dealer. There's no room to work.
No more wrench and a screwdriver.
Yeah. Yeah, but he was a real mechanic. I think a lot of mechanics today analyze what a machine spits out. He's able to. He did it the old way: sense, smell, touch, and knew what secondary secondary results were from one result. So I learned that way, and I still listen to cars in that same light.
Well, you are showing me up.
No. No.
So, you know, I was really interested to talk to you, especially this month, October month, because it is the observed domestic violence. And I know you went through a kind of a rough period, so I'm curious and would like you to take us through that a bit.
Okay, so as I said, you touched on when I moved to London, Ontario, and when I moved, I was still a confused child because I experienced sexual abuse that my parents didn't know about. So that, I think, punctuated a lot of my bad choices throughout my years. So when I came.
So I'm sorry. So you experienced sexual abuse where you were living before, or when you got to London?
No, when I was in Godrich, right before we moved to London. and it was a family friend. And they never knew until, you know, I did the play. So that's another story. But I came to London, and, you know, coming from a strict household and being a confused child, and I say confused, I just didn't know who I was. I looked for attention in the wrong places, and I found it. And I met a gentleman that was 4 years, I won't say gentleman, I met a boy that was 4 years older than me. And I thought it was everything. I thought I was something special because this man showed interest in me. And I was 16 at the time. And he was a landed immigrant from Michigan. And he showed me a world I never, ever experienced. He showed me a world of the drugs and alcohol. And, you know, I came from a straight lace family where you couldn't do this, a Christian home, this and this. So I thought that world was a little bit more exciting. Long story short, he, you know, during our dating phase, we dated for probably a year and a half. And throughout the dating, it was turbulent relationships. He would hit me, but every hit was an escalation. But the makeup was, it made me feel loved. And that sounds like such a mixed bag to comprehend. But abuse is psychological. It's not just a physical abuse. So I started to believe who he said I was, which was worth nothing. The relationship continued, and I got pregnant. I was pregnant at 17 with my daughter, which has been the best blessing for me. But because I was pregnant, my mother wanted me to get married because that was the thing. You can't have a child without a last name, a cultural issue as well. Mm-hmm. And I don't blame her for it. They did what they knew. I don't agree with it today. It's not a step I would force on my daughter, but we got married, and in 4 months I was married. And within the 4 months time that I was married, I was physically abused, knifed, punched, kicked, beaten, embarrassed. I used to go out with my friends, and he didn't want.
Pregnant at the time, or did you get married while you were pregnant or after?
Yes, I got married when I was pregnant. I got married when I was 7 months pregnant, and you know, I was trying to find a church to marry me because they didn't think that I shouldn't get married in the church. And you know, back then, that was in '85. The world was a different world than it is today. It's a lot more open to single mothers, I should say, at the time, or people that get pregnant before they're married. And so they married me. I had the child for about 2 months, and I was abused when I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. He held a gun to my belly while I was pregnant. It was really psychologically damaging. Spitting and punching, and I still have the scars, and I can talk about it because I'm over. If he met the person I am today, I know who I am. Mm-hmm. Back then, I didn't know who I was, and I allowed him to prepare the path and set the tone for my life. I moved out of the house because my parents did not want me around that kind of atmosphere. And then when I threatened to leave, he would threaten to burn their house down. So I was trying to protect the family and protect my relationship with my parents all at the same time, while balancing an unhealthy relationship. And it was a mess.
How did your parents find out about the abuse?
Well, I came over one day in sunglasses. I was sitting at the dinner table, and my little sister, she was very in tune with what was going on. She knew to an extent, and they asked me to take off my glasses. And I took off my sunglasses, and my eye was out to here, right? Mm-hmm. So my dad said, "What happened?" And I said, I got into a street fight. And my sister said, "No, you didn't get into a street fight. He did that to you." I said, "No, street fight." I covered for him. Mm-hmm. But the last assault that they found out, and this is the turning point of my story, sort of, is when he abused me so bad that there was the day before my daughter was supposed to be dedicated for a christening, and there was blood all over the apartment. And my dad, because he owned a business, the people upstairs heard all the noise, and they knocked on the door, and they said, open the door. He wouldn't open the door because he had a pole at the door where if I tried to get out, he would beat my knuckles. And I still have the scars, and my finger is restitched. But I opened the door and the chain came, and I was able to open it, and Mr. Bennett was his name. He came and got me through the door, and my husband at the time was standing there, and Mr. Bennett said he's going to phone the police. The police came and took him, found him hiding in the garbage chute, which was very appropriate. But he phoned my dad, and my dad came with his gun, and my brother came with his baseball bat. And the police had to say to him, you know, Mr. Burnett, don't put yourself in jeopardy for this guy. And at that time, the laws changed for domestic violence, where if the police saw something wrong, they could charge him, because I used to phone and the police would come, and then I changed my mind. No, he didn't do anything. We just had do you want to press charges? No, I don't want to press charges. Are you sure you don't want to press charges? Yes, I'm sure. And then they would leave. But that last assault, the laws changed probably 2 weeks before that assault, and the police were able to charge him with the assault. He was in jail for 1.5 years. And I was in the hospital for about a 1.5 weeks with that. But then that it didn't even end there. And as I said, it's psychological, because you're so used to, for some reason, I started to connect being loved with hitting. And that was messed up. They deported him, but they said they wouldn't deport him if we were getting back together. So we went to a hearing, and he threatened.
Sorry, but let me jump in, because it's interesting that you spoke about the psychological aspect. I was about to ask you about that. So, you know, how long were you before you got arrested? How much time are we talking about between the first time he assaulted you and you got arrested?
Okay, so the first time he assaulted me was just like a slap, and that was when we were dating. So we dated for 1.5 years, and then we were married for 4 months.
So almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the psychology, what you're thinking, and how you're feeling about yourself. You could speak to that a little bit more, because, you know, obviously there are lots of women who are experiencing even today the same thing that you went through. And I want to see how we can connect with them and, you know, give them hope.
Well, the thing is, everybody comes to their realization on their own time, and it wasn't a switch. And I think I had a couple of factors against me, and that was the sexual abuse that I suffered. And then I had my identity crisis. And then I wanted to fit in, and I didn't want to be embarrassed and go back home because something didn't work out. So and then the psychology of like, I'll just stay in it, it's going to get better. Because after they hit you in the makeup, it gives you hope, because it's you still want to believe that there's a better side of it. But then he starts blaming you for the action.
Right.
So you start to think that there's something wrong with yourself. So what I did, I started self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, just as a coping mechanism. And I can't really say the psychology is you're too afraid of the change, and it was safer to be in the familiar, and because of a lot of emotions. And I was young too, right? So the psychology.
Not that your parents would have said, no, you can't come home. You just decided on your own that you didn't want to.
Well, see, I left unwillingly, right? Because I left and lived with him first. And then the pregnancy came while I was living with him. So I just want to save face to my parents, because My dad didn't like him from the beginning. My mother was trying to be accommodating, and then the more the then the isolation came, less of the family. So my family thought I was pulling away from him, but I wasn't allowed to phone them. Back then they had the phones that you dialed. So
Okay.
he put a pin in the phone that I could only receive calls in and not dial out. So I was basically a prisoner in my own home. Um, and I think you start to believe there's no other way, because that's how you've been living and that's how he's shown you. So yeah, it was very sick. I look at it and I just think, I look back and I think, how did somebody control me like that? Like, what was I thinking about myself? But I try not to be too hard on myself on that, because I think that there was a lot of issues that I was dealing with that I didn't deal with initially. So
Yeah. So you get to the point where he gets arrested and you at least have a physical break. How were you able to make that psychological break through?
that didn't happen for years. That didn't happen for at least 10 years after, because even after we split, it took another a year and a half to get the divorce. And then there was the cross-border problems with, trying to see the child. It was hell for 10 years. And then I still didn't stay enough to deal with the assault. I didn't deal with anything. I just lived through it and masked it with alcohol, partied. I did some stuff that I'm not too proud of, but I realized that it was the way that I was able to cope with what I was feeling inside. So my realization, though, came at a moment where my parents took my daughter away from me because she wasn't in a really good environment, that I couldn't raise her in an environment that was conducive for, a good future. And that was the best thing that they ever did for me, because I realized that I was responsible for another life. And again, that realization didn't come immediately. That was another 2 years, running and ripping on the streets and whatnot. And my parents, they've stood with me through it all. And my daughter is, a healthy, normal child, has her own life and kids now. But my turn, when you have a child, and those lonely times when alcohol stops working, and then you have to sit with yourself. So when that happened, my mother did take me to see a psychologist. And I spoke to the psychologist one day about what happened. And I told my mother I can't go back, because it was like reliving the pain, because they want you to go deep about what happened. And I just felt that I could find a way to deal with it myself. And I didn't, but I found a way that I could validate who I was. And I went back to my roots of Christianity. And I went back to the church and I read the Bible, and I started to reintroduce myself to my internal peace. And that might sound odd, but that's what helped me. My internal spirit was disconnected with the reality of where I came from.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, everybody kind of get to that point on their own. Everybody has a different path. So some people will spend many years in therapy, an hour a week or whatever it is. But you decided, hey, the church and Christianity, your faith is the way back.
Yeah, I didn't want to stay in the pain. I'm not one to continue to talk about my past. And it's not, I know I can help other people, but I like to focus on the solution. Like I know exactly what I went through. Abuse to me on any level is abuse. But I just think that sometimes you have to, and this is not to downplay therapy. Sometimes the therapy keeps you in the problem a bit too long. And I found out that one session for me was way too much. It was, she wanted to relive every moment, every and maybe there's parts of me that still haven't dealt with every individual item that I've gone through, but I feel like I'm in a much better place, and I have the tools that I need to make logical decisions and move through life instead of just blindly passing through it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, I can see your point, sitting there with the therapist and reliving those experiences can be incredibly painful, and you're not really moving forward. In fact, you're digging yourself deeper into the experience. So you're back in the church, and you're talk to us about that journey to recovery, which obviously was
Well,
not a flip of the switch.
Sure. So the journey of to the recovery was saddled. I straddled it on both sides. I went back to the church, but I wasn't like living the holy life. I was still 1 foot here, 1 foot here, because I was still trying to figure it out. And then, I had a really great mentor that actually took the time to sit with me and talk me through me as a person and not me as a sinner. And I say that to say that sometimes Christianity can come at you like a hammer and it's a turn off. But this lady she was very compassionate. And I grew up in a Christian home. So I knew some of the foundational elements, but I knew about God, but I didn't know him for myself. So I wanted to know the God that for myself, and I did my own study in the Bible, and I got to know and have a personal relationship. You can't have a relationship on any level with anyone unless you get to know them, and that's just spending time with yourself, going through your emotions, and just submitting and humbling yourself. But my biggest pain point was I didn't stop to feel. I was a masker of emotions, and once I felt my emotions, acknowledged them, and moved through them, it helped me to understand that I'm not this terrible person. I'm not this I'm not this person that he said I was. And then I went back to school, and I just became a workaholic, and maybe I turned one addiction into another addiction. So I went to school. My sister, my little sister, she always encouraged me to do do more, because I kept my life honest with her, because I did not want her to do the same things as I did. So she was very clear on her path, and I hope she used me as a map to make the better choices that she did. But I went to school, and I eventually got my master's, and then I decided to tell my story. I met a man that actually really wanted to know me. And he realized that there was things in me that I didn't want people to know. And I'm thinking, okay, so he really wants to get to know me, because I wouldn't be in relationships for long. As soon as I felt a connection, I would disconnect. It scared me to get connected. So I use sex as a tool, unfortunately, and I used and I disconnected from my emotions. So as you can see, I didn't really heal. I was just going through the motions, even with the church. But the church was the pivot that I have to do things different. And so this gentleman, he took the time to know me and asked me some really honest questions. And he said, you know what, I know you've been through some stuff. I can tell you've been through some stuff. And I just want you to know that I'm right here for you. I'm not going anywhere. And he's my husband today. He's awesome. He's stood behind, and he's the one that encouraged me to tell my story. And when I did, that was the greatest healing for me at that point.
Yeah. How was those experiences? How has that influenced the work that you do now with women?
Well, the work I do with women, I just want them to see that you have to live in your truth. If you go through life masking who you are, you'll never truly understand what freedom of living is. I no longer feel like I have to sit in front of somebody and pretend that I'm this perfect person that's never been through anything and that I've just arrived where I am, you know, with ease. And I used to do that, you know, because I come from a good family. But now I'm able to say that, you know, my past has really made me who I am today. Do I regret any of it? I regret the choices, but I don't regret the lessons. And I try and say, use the lessons and move forward. But you have to live in your truth. Truth to me is integral to being who I am today. That's the lesson in all of my speakings. Any platform I do, I use it to edify and to build up and to just inform them that it doesn't matter what happens in your past. Today is today.
Yeah. Do you find yourself working with other women who have experienced domestic violence?
I have become working with indirectly. I find myself working when I did the play. And I thought I did the play as a means for people to get to understand who I was, but it actually opened the doors to organizations reaching out to me to speak on it, or individuals saying, you know, I've gone through that. Men and women had reached out to me, and I was overwhelmed, and I was humbled at a time that, you know, I didn't have. I just gave less power to the shame that I felt, and it was amazing to be part of a solution and I realized that the play helped so much more people than I anticipated, and to me that was the greatest experience from the play, and it opened doors for me to speak at. I've speak at a lot of women's groups. I'm connected with one agency in particular, My Sister's Place, a New York agency. I've done fundraisers on their behalf, and I volunteer for them, and I'm just a resource for people who know that it's nothing for my phone to ring and say, you know, my daughter is going through this. Do you mind talking to her? I don't mind talking to her, but I don't try and force anybody to leave their situation. The best thing you can do for a victim of abuse is be a support. I lost a lot of friends throughout the times that I was abused, because they thought I was stupid. Why did you stay in it? Whatever. I just let them know that I'm there, and when they come to the realization, if they want my help, I'm going to help them and guide them on the next steps and how to. But I'll never slander and say, you know, because I've been there. It's a psychological effect.
Yeah. So the play Wounded Soul, a lot of women obviously related to it. How? But you also mentioned men that they were impacted. In what way would you say that their soul was wounded?
Well, they were sexually abused as a child, and I had 3 or 4 stories of the same, and I was at the end of every show, I was in tears just from the stories that I heard. And that's why I couldn't move forward to do something else, because I had a goal in mind that after I do this play, I'll do this play, I'll do this play. And then my husband's like, you shouldn't move on from here. There's a lot of people that need this. And that's when I realized that, you know, my testimony can help so many people. And so that's when when you fall into your purpose, it's almost seamless. The doors it's almost seamless. Like, you know, this is where I should have been. Where I find that my passion now is what I wake up every morning to do, more so than my 9 to 5. So when that pivot happens, I know that, you know, I'm aligned with my purpose.
Indeed. A Woman's Worth Award, another of your brainchild and baby. What inspired that? How did that come about?
Now that was birthed from the play, the Wounded Soul, when I said that I couldn't move forward from that play because there were so many stories I was hearing. And that's where I got a lot of media attention to on that aspect, because I was so transparent. So I figured, how can I help these women? Like, how can I be support for them? And the idea came probably 2 nights after the debut of The Wounded Soul, after the last show. And I said, I'll have an awards where I honor women. I'll have a nomination with a certain criteria. I'll honor women who've gone through, because there's a lot of women that you'll see, 1 in 4 women have been involved in domestic violence, and 1 in 9 men. So if you think of every 9th person you talk to, somebody has experienced some kind of abuse. It was just, to me, it was necessary to acknowledge that there's strength in your story, and that you should be commended for using your platform or whatever your passion is to help other people. So that's what the Women's Worth stands for. It's women that still, you know, overcome adversity and reaching back to help other people.
So your mantra, Sheryl, is every decision will cost you something. Doing nothing is still a decision. Expand on that for us.
So some people, for me, it's if I choose not to make a decision because I'm afraid, that's still a decision not to make a decision. So I think every decision is going to cost you something. And when I say cost, it's not going to be, it's not like it's going to cost you some kind of sacrifice. There's always a sacrifice attached to a decision. Either you're going to keep something or lose something. But staying neutral is not an option. So I'm resolute never to stay in neutral and let things happen by default. I'll make a decision that, oh, I'll make a decision tomorrow, or I'll make a decision when I'm better, when I get more information, but I'll make a decision. I'm just not going to, oh, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what, I'm not that person. So.
To us, because you mentioned the word purpose. How would you describe your purpose?
Purpose for me is walking in the truth of who you were meant to be. Purpose is fulfilling a need that where you can use something that's naturally given to you for the betterment of other people. Naturally given to me, I would say is my my trials. And my experiences. That's something that no one can really speak to unless they've experienced it. And I find that the more authentic I am, it's so easy. My life has been easier since I've come full circle and been so transparent. It's like transparency, vulnerability. They say is the new courage. So I think purpose is standing in your truth. And walking in your truth and making sure that you affect lives with your purpose, with your abilities, your skills.
Indeed. So how would someone find you if a women's group out there wanted you to come share your story, or somebody wanted some advice as to how they can get through their particular situation? Where do they find you?
I am Sheryl Hatwood, Sheryl with an S. SherylHatwood.com, no space, and at Sheryl Hatwood at Facebook and Instagram, or endlessvoiceproductions.com is a website, and Endless Voice Productions at Facebook and IG.
Indeed, Sheryl Hatwood. Yes, what an amazing story of really triumph, you know, and you know, perseverance and belief in yourself, and one that ends with you finding your purpose, you know, and you mentioned, you know, filling a need, meeting a need, because there definitely is a need out there for people like you to share your story, to be authentic, because it gives people hope. It you know, somebody gave you hope, and you are also giving hope. So thank you, Sheryl, for the hope that you give and the courage to share your story and the wisdom that you have garnered from that experience. Thanks for spending time with us. You definitely epitomize the Keep on Pushing philosophy.
Thanks for having me and honoring Domestic Violence Awareness Month.